What's up, everyone? Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we dive in, just a couple quick things. Number one, of course, shout out to sponsors of the show, Ledn.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin for a couple of different services, one of which is to earn interest on your Bitcoin paid in Bitcoin with their Bitcoin savings account, and the second of which is to use your Bitcoin as collateral for a US or Canadian dollar loan. Now, if you want to check out those services, I've provided a link in the show notes down below. And actually, if you opt to get one of the loans, you use the link that I provided, they will credit your account with an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin. And secondly, if you're into Bitcoin, then privacy is, of course, of the utmost importance, and one of the things I use to help with this is NordVPN. I have this on my phone and computer, and essentially what it does is it hides your IP address, it helps encrypt your browsing data, and it has the added benefit of unlocking geo-blocked content. So if you want to check them out, there's a link also that I provided down below, and if you use it, you can get the service for only $3 a month. So be sure to check that out and help out the show at the same time. With that, let's dive into the news. Now, this story here, it actually broke a few days back, but I've been away and I got back into town from Riga for the hodl conference there, and which was awesome, by the way. I really had a blast, but that's besides the point. This news dropped a few days ago. Jack Mallers was interviewed on Tales from the Crypt. Again, one awesome podcast, which Bull Bitcoin has been sponsoring as of late, which is also awesome. But so Jack Mallers dropped this information that he is doing this integration with Zap Wallet, which is a desktop and mobile Bitcoin Lightning wallet. And what it's going to allow people to do as it gradually gets rolled out is to essentially download the app, link their debit card, and be able to instantly buy Bitcoin and have it basically in their wallet via Lightning and spendable within seconds. So after triggering the buy, of course. So the whole thing takes a few minutes, which is incredible. So how is this working and what's going on here? So basically, it's been a year-long labor of love for him, and what he's done is he's gone through all the trouble of regulation and figuring out what he needed to do to achieve this. So what he's doing is he'll be kind of managing channels and by default opening up channels. And the way this is going to work when you actually buy via the app is that it's going to do something called a turbo channel. So normally what you would have to do if you want to get Bitcoin, then get it on Lightning, and then start spending it is, you need to first get yourself on an exchange, buy the Bitcoin, send it out to your own personal wallet. At that point, it's still on chain, and so then you need to fund a Lightning channel, assuming that you have a Lightning wallet and you know how to do that, and that can take, again, a confirmation for it to do that, so an extra 10 minutes beyond that, and then even then you funded the channel and you can spend out but you can't receive, so you've got to get reciprocal channels. There's a lot of stuff to deal with because Lightning is still very early, and so he looks to start to smooth out some of that. And so with a turbo channel, what would happen is, given that you're already paying for the Bitcoin, they've already got those funds locked down on their end. And so they can open a Lightning channel with you with funds already allocated to your side of the channel, meaning that you have spending capability without even having to wait for confirmation on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it is very much instantly spendable within a few seconds, which is awesome. That's amazing. So imagine the process of being able to say, hey, I want some Bitcoin, link my debit card, I'd like $100 worth of Bitcoin, and you hit the button and it's there, and then you could just spend it right away wherever you like using Lightning. Pretty awesome. Now, there's been a lot of hoops for him to jump through. It blows my mind in the States how everything is state by state. So he's having to get approval through every single one of the 50 states to do something like this. He managed to keep KYC to a minimum, but there's also going to be limits on there. So when I say KYC to a minimum, it's literally going to be like name, email, and I think address. Yeah, name, email, and address. And so there will be limits at first of probably around $100, and he's just kind of, that's also to check out the technical things and look for bugs. Unfortunately, initially, it looks like this is only going to be available in the US, but he looks to take this worldwide over time. But if you do want to jump on the beta testing, then you can head over to his website. So I'll have that included down below. But yeah, just all around really, really cool news. And I hope that this will help kind of smooth that onboarding process. And it's future proofing too, right? Because it's only a matter of time before on-chain fees continue to grow. And so this kind of, a lot of new users may not ever really see on-chain. They may just interact with Lightning, especially as a consumer and just using it day to day. A lot of users may just do that. Now, the nice thing is they will be, if you're using Zap, his wallet, you will be running a Lightning node on your phone. It won't be in any way custodial. It's going to be, you're in custody. But all in all, I think this is an incredible development, and kudos to Jack for doing all this work. And I'm excited to see this roll out over the coming months, years, and see how it grows and kind of it fits into the whole ecosystem and what Lightning becomes. So we're going to move on here. Everybody was super stoked about this coming down the pipeline for a while now, and nothing has really happened. So Bakkt, they are offering futures contracts for Bitcoin where you can speculate on the future price in Bitcoin. And the thing that was different from them and the CME, which launched back in 2017, is that the CME was settled in cash. So you could just speculate and say, I think the price of Bitcoin is going here. And all you had to do is put up cash for that, and it was settled in cash. No Bitcoin changed hands during those contracts. Whereas with Bakkt, in order to participate, you need to actually have Bitcoin, and when the contract settles, it settles in Bitcoin. So people needed to be buying Bitcoin in order to participate here. Well, it launched, and essentially not much has happened. At the time of this article, it's been active for not very long. I mean, since midnight or so, but about 28 Bitcoin worth of contracts has gone off. It's probably gone up a little bit since then, but more or less a slow first day. I'm not particularly surprised. We saw the same kind of thing with the CME stuff, although, I mean, that was in the midst of a major bull market, and there was more volume, but we've seen other products like this come out, not necessarily Bitcoin settled, but cash settled, and it's more or less what is the interest at the time. The good thing with this is that options like this will be available when there are manias, and so it's just another kind of release valve where liquidity can go to. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of comments on Twitter and stuff. You can see this Bakkt will likely first be a trickle and then a flood. The reality is that most regulated futures contracts get low adoption on day one simply because not all futures brokers are ready to clear it. Many people want to wait and see, and the tickers are not even populated on risk systems, etc. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot happening here yet. It's, in my eyes, again, just future proofing. And as far as what the price of Bitcoin has done, well, I mean, it's down a couple percent on the day. Not really much movement, but dipping a tad. So it hasn't really been decisive. That could change, but it seems to have been more or less a non-event, and some people are treating a non-event as a bearish event when realistically I think it's just kind of neutral. I think that the market is just kind of, we've been bouncing around in a range for months now. The range that we've been in for the past few months has now been longer than the entire expansion from when we started popping up above the $3,000 range all the way up to where we are now and beyond. That expansion phase is now, again, in the same amount of time that it is we've been just bouncing around. So anyways, I guess we'll see how this develops over time, but again, seems like a non-event to me. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on this, and this is stuff that's been going on with the Federal Reserve. It's not necessarily directly related to Bitcoin, but in a general sense, macroeconomic stuff like this is very related to Bitcoin. And so this is to do with a couple things. Now, not necessarily mentioned in this article is the fact that the Fed has dropped interest rates again when they had been saying that they've been wanting to raise them, if you go back a year or two. Yeah, they cut rates once again, but more interestingly, they've been pumping billions of dollars into the system yet again. So these are repo injections. So basically, banks have not been able to meet their cash liquidity needs overnight, and so the Fed has had to step in and give them billions and billions of dollars. But more or less, this is just another form of QE, of quantitative easing, which we saw in 2008. Now, how much money has been pumped in? Well, to give you some perspective, back in 2008, between $700 and $800 billion were pumped into the economy when we were in the throes of the financial crisis. Right now, we're supposedly, if you look at the stock market and you look at what the president is saying, it's the best economy ever. However, in a number of, 4 or 5 days, the Fed has pumped $278 billion into securities repurchases, which is absolutely insane. They've basically done a third, more than a third of what was printed during the midst of 2008 for the financial crisis in 4 days. And there are plans to continue this type of behavior. So what does that say about the economy? I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I'm going to speculate. It's not great. So I just wanted to read this quick excerpt from this article here. Fed officials and bankers dismissed the rare liquidity breakdown as a hiccup stemming from a series of confidential factors in bond markets and corporate tax payments. It wasn't a very comforting explanation, not when other economic warning signs are flashing too. 17 trillion in bonds worldwide are showing negative yields. There's a worsening US-China trade war, and manufacturing indicators are signaling an impending global recession. And again, one of the interesting things here is about the bonds. So government bonds are typically when the government will borrow money from people and institutions for an extended period of time and guarantee them a certain rate of return, which is typically lower than the returns you would get from a stock or other types of securities, but it's also typically a safer bet. And so people go to bonds for safety. If you've been investing for your whole life and then you start to look at retirement, you're going to gradually probably, well, not necessarily what you're going to do, but traditionally people would then start to allocate to things like cash and bonds, where you're still getting a rate of return, but it's much smaller and it's safer, and you're likely to be exposed to less risk. Well, now 17 trillion worldwide worth of bonds, of government bonds, are now negative yields. So what does this mean? It means that if you invest in government bonds, in some cases the 30-year bonds, where your funds are locked up for 30 years, or the bonds are locked up for 30 years, you get a negative interest rate, meaning that you are paying to lend somebody your money. So you're lending the government your money, and they're saying, great, we're going to charge you for that. And it makes you scratch your head, because It's insane. So $17 trillion worth of money are tied up in bonds that are essentially eating away at the money sitting in them, which isn't necessarily a good thing. So that means that people that are, funds, retirement funds that would typically be allocated in things like bonds are having to look around and say, well, we need to put this money in riskier assets so that we actually get the returns that we're promising. And even retirees are looking, saying, well, it's going to eat away my savings over the coming years. And so what do I do with my money? Do I take it out to cash? Do I just have cash? And not only that, but they're starting to crack down on things like if you have cash in bank accounts in large amounts, then certain countries are looking at just taking some of that gradually over time. They're even looking in certain countries into looking into your safety deposit boxes if you have cash there and starting to tax those, which is, again, terrifying. So, in conclusion, safety and sats? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here. This is, to me, a shining beacon of why the separation of money and state needs to exist and why Bitcoin could be that release valve. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it there. I hate to end on a note of foreboding like that, but them's the breaks. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am back from Riga now, as you can tell. I had a blast there. To everybody that I met out there, it was just a really great time, and I'm so stoked about everything, so bullish, and all the talks were wonderful. And yeah, I will be glad to be back next year. And if you're new here, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and share. Always hit that share button. It's nice to get more eyeballs on the videos. If you want to help the show in another way, of course, hit up either of the sponsors I mentioned at the beginning, Ledn and Nord. Those links are down below. And if you really liked what you saw, you can hit up my tippin.me page and drop me some Bitcoin via the Lightning Network. With that, I am out. I will see you guys tomorrow for your daily session.